yeah, after my seventh property, is pretty much my wife saying, I don't want to do this anymore because a lot of the work I just say, hey, you want to call these tenants up or
Oh
whatever,
yeah.
and she's like, we need a property manager. So I have a real estate team with a few agents on it. So they wanted to start managing them. So we kind of worked together. They got their systems in place. They'd use, background checks, credit checks. We started charging application fees, and they weren't emotional about it. It's like, that's their job. That's what you do.
Yep.
You don't have to worry about it. So once I did that, I made more money, even though I was paying them, because we got late fees. People paid more rent, and we had better tenants.
It's a great point. And your quality of life probably went way up too. Just not having to worry about it, take the stress off the marriage, that your wife's being given all the dirty jobs of making the phone calls and communicating with the people that aren't paying. So I got to imagine that was a potentially a marriage saver, right?
Welcome to the Rent Prep for Landlords podcast. And now your hosts, Stephen White and Eric Worrell.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Rent Prep for Landlords. You got Steve and I here as always, except for when one of us isn't here. And then this week we got a special guest in the podcast. His name is Mark Ferguson, and Mark is out in Colorado. And I think he's going to be an interesting guest to get some insights from here because he has his own podcast, the Invest for More podcast, and he's at investformore.com. But Mark is a real estate agent. He has flips going on constantly. He has rental properties, commercial rental properties. So we just want to pick your brain here today, Mark, and welcome you to the podcast.
No, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be on and hopefully learn some stuff myself and help others too.
I'm shocked you could even find time because you just told us that you sold 3 properties this week.
And I sold all of them while I was in Disneyland.
Wow.
So I have a really good team. I'll say that from the beginning. There's no way I could do all this myself. And I'm a huge believer in hiring good people and letting them do their job. So
yeah, good point. Yeah. That to me, I mean, one property is, takes me out. You got to have a good team to be able to do that and do it from afar and be with your family and enjoying time in some place like Disney and being able to still hustle like that. It's pretty impressive.
Oh, thank you.
So, Mark, as far as your beginnings, like I think you were saying before we got on the call here that your dad was a real estate agent. So that's kind of how you got introduced. And then you were a real estate agent yourself. But what made you want to kind of like diversify your portfolio and start getting into these other investments?
Yeah, I mean, I got my degree, business degree in finance at the University of Colorado and wanted nothing to do with real estate. But I kind of got sucked into it because I didn't find an awesome job. So I became an agent. My dad flipped houses once in a while. So I kind of floated along, not doing, super well for a few years. And then got into the REO business, HUD business, listing properties for banks, started making good money. And then I'm like, well, I have some money in the stock market. I really hate the stock market. I have no control. I don't know what's going on. And even though I was in the real estate industry and we'd flipped houses and selling houses, so few agents invest in real estate themselves. It's crazy. I think like more than 50% don't even own a house. So
Wow.
I started looking at the best place to put my money, and I just kept coming up with real estate over and over again. So 2010, I just started buying rental properties and ended up buying 16 residential properties from 2010 to 2015, and then took a little break because prices almost tripled in my area in Colorado in about 6 years, and then started buying commercial properties in the last year just because they're cash flowing a lot better and made more sense.
All right. And then I think we kind of touched on the numbers before, but can you refresh me on that? So right now you have 20 rentals, and then how many flips have you been working on this year?
Yeah, technically I have 18 rentals now. I bought 20, but I sold a couple that were my worst performing ones, and the market was doing so good. But I've got 19 flips going right now. So I had 22 at the start of last week. I think I've bought 26 flips this year and sold 22, but I have a bunch under contract for the end of the year, and just really ramped that business up. I think last year I sold 18. The year before that I sold 12. The year before that I sold 8. So kind of along the line of stop buying rentals, I was putting a lot of that money into the flipping business because the market was just so tough to cash flow in.
All right. Now let me ask you this. I know that flipping is like I don't know, maybe it's on the downslide a little bit. For a while there, it was like the sexiest thing that you could possibly do in real estate, right? Eric and I were just talking about this today. I ran into a guy over the weekend that was losing on a flip. And, you could tell just in everything about him. He just looked like he was a beaten down man, and I don't think he was doing it nowhere near as much as you're doing. So this one flip probably meant a whole lot to him. But what are your percentages on a flip? How often do you win? Do you always win on a flip, or do you take a beating sometimes on a flip?
I think right now I try and keep track of all this in my blog, but I've sold 137 flips in my career, I think. And I think we've lost money on 5.
Wow. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah. I mean, in some of those situations you just can't control. Like we bought a foreclosure where the seller filed a lawsuit against the bank on the last day and sued the bank and is tied up for a year in court. There's some weird situations out there. I decided to do the work myself on a flip, which was the biggest mistake I ever made in my life. That was horrible. So maybe that guy you're talking about, he's actually doing the work himself. That's like,
he is. Yeah.
No, I think in flipping. So, but yeah, I think we average about 30,000 in profit per flip. And it's just, it is definitely harder to find those deals now than it was, 4 or 5 years ago. But there's always deals out there if you know where to look, whether it's off market, MLS. It's really hard to buy foreclosures right now because there simply aren't any. But there's still people who have equity, have run down houses and want to sell them. So.
Do you say it's harder now because more people are in the game, more people are doing it?
No, I would just say it's harder now because there's less properties for sale in general. So in Colorado, we have our lowest inventory of houses for sale that we've ever had, at least in northern Colorado where I'm at. And the last 6 years, it's been like that every year. It just keeps dropping. So, there have been 100 houses for sale in a town of 100,000 people where, trying to find a deal there is tough. You can do it, but there's just other ways you have to look. Where I think previously people are like, oh, I'll just go, buy a foreclosure in REO and it'll be a good deal. You have to look a lot harder now for those deals.
Yeah, I think whoever's doing the marketing for Colorado is doing a great job because I've had a bunch of friends that I graduated high school with, and they're like, "Yeah, I'm moving to Denver. I'm moving to Fort Collins." I'm like, "Why?" Yeah. Like, it's just like for whatever reason, it turned into the kind of this, mecca for people like in their 20s, 30s to kind of move out to and just enjoy. Because you got sunshine out there, you got mountains, rivers, you got everything you need, kind of. So.
Yeah. It's the weather is really nice in Colorado. People don't realize there's kind of 2 climates, the plains and the mountains. And we get more sunshine than any state on the plains. And, I'm golfing in January most years. So it's not like we're snowbound the entire year. And then, it's a pretty cool place. And then I know a lot of people think the marijuana laws contributed to that, which I think have some, but it's a real small part. I think the economy and the climate, all of that has a lot to do with it.
Sure.
So as far as your portfolio, like one of the things I was interested in chatting with you, I think we do have a good amount of listeners to our podcast that do purely rental properties. They like the long-term equity of it and having that steady cash flow coming in each month. What have you found through your investments? So you got the 18 properties now, but then you're doing all these flips on the side. Like, do you have any kind of strategy or way that you decide, like, all right, I'm going to allocate this much funds towards flips and, keep like this long-term investment strategy with my rentals? Can you just let us know what you're kind of thinking with that?
It's all just random. No, no, a lot of it is just kind of by what deals I can find and what properties I can find. But I did make a goal to buy 100 single family rentals back in 2013. And that kind of, has gone some changes as the market changed. But, I always wanted to buy as many rentals as I could. And then how I made that income, whether it's an agent, flipper, whatever, I was just trying to make as much money, put as much of it into rentals as I could. And I really wanted to buy, at least 10 properties a year if I could. Mm-hmm. But our market changed so much that basically became impossible, not just because the cash flow, but, I was buying $100,000 properties before where you're putting $20,000 down. Now you've got to buy $200,000 properties where you're putting $40,000 down and doing a repair. It just takes a lot more money. So really lately it's just been, wherever the deals are has been where I've been investing my money. And the deals have been in flips, not so much rentals. And now that I kind of worked into the commercial side of it, I'm starting to allocate more of that money into rentals. I'm thinking about, I don't know if I need 22 flips at one time. That's pretty stressful. That's a lot of work. So, I'd be happy with, 12 to 15 going at a time and kind of buying more rentals this next year.
Okay. One thing I'm interested in is we were just actually finished up an episode on your podcast, Invest for More podcast, and you were saying that when you originally got started, you were managing your own rental properties, and you kind of ran into a nightmare tenant, and then now you have a property manager. Can you kind of walk us through that experience of managing your own rental properties and what it was like for you in that nightmare tenant situation?
Yeah. So my first 7 properties, I managed them myself. My wife helped as well, but we're doing the tenant screening, calling. In the beginning, I didn't even pull credit checks. I didn't even charge an application fee. It was just kind of like, oh, you seem like a nice person. Sure, you can come rent the house. But
the old gut check.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I was, really busy doing other stuff too. So it's not like I had a ton of time to do all this. And it worked out pretty well the first, year or two. But then we had a couple tenants who got behind. And then, of course, I wouldn't charge late fees. I wouldn't call them up and get on them. And it just got worse and worse until it snowballed, until all of a sudden, like, you're 3 months behind. There's no way you're going to catch up. The only thing to do is pretty much, either try and get you out or evict you. And, I didn't know what I was doing on that side of it. It was just, a couple, I got lucky with a bunch of tenants, but a couple of bad ones really bit me with vacancies and evictions. And then one of those people actually that I found, I had for 5 years, and they just did $20,000 of damage in one of my properties, and they were good tenants for 4 years. And then everything just fell apart the last year. I don't know what happened, but yeah, after my 7th property, is pretty much my wife saying, I don't want to do this anymore, because a lot of the work I just say, hey, you want to call these tenants up or whatever? Yeah. And she's like, we need a property manager. So I have a real estate team with a few agents on it. So they wanted to start managing them. So we kind of worked together. They got their systems in place. They'd use, background checks, credit checks. We started charging application fees, and they weren't emotional about it. It's like, that's their job. That's what you do.
Yep.
You don't have to worry about it. So once I did that, I made more money, even though I was paying them, because we got late fees, people paid more rent, and we had better tenants.
It's a great point. And your quality of life probably went way up too. Just not having to worry about it, take the stress off the marriage, that your wife's being given all the dirty jobs of making the phone calls and communicating with the people that aren't paying. So I got to imagine that was potentially a marriage saver, right?
Yeah. And it wasn't, it wasn't that bad. I would say it was more of, us just letting things slide, which could cause more problems down the road than it being, it was a hassle, but it wasn't a huge problem. But at the same time, when you're not making calls, when you're not paying attention to stuff, that's when you can get really big problems. And we didn't have any huge ones, but we definitely had a lot of small ones, and then eventually some bigger ones down the road.
So how did you go about, like, when you started and you said you first got into buying rentals, were you doing that mainly on your own? You were probably the real estate agent too. Like, how did you start to build your team that you've gotten to the point that you can handle as much stuff as you have going on now?
So I kind of hired my dad always had a little team, kind of like me, him, and one assistant. And then when I started getting really busy with the REO stuff and HUD stuff, I hired another assistant for myself. And then we hired kind of another agent, another assistant. So we had 4 or 5 people on the team. And when I first started buying properties, it was all me. I'd find the properties. I decide if they're good rentals or not. I'd go get the financing. I was paying for all of them myself. And then as things progressed, we started doing more flips and things. I ended up buying out my dad. So I have more aggressive goals than he does, and would buy more interesting properties than he did. So when I bought him out, then I kind of hired one of my really good friends from college to run the team. We hired some more agents, kind of built it out bigger. And then, the REO HUD stuff pretty much disappeared because of our market. And so that's another reason why I went more into flipping, is because of that. And so my assistant kind of became a full-time project manager. We really just switched from selling 200 houses a year as agents to flipping. So kind of like you guys told me how you went from your credit collections company to tenant screening, is kind of like that. We had the same people, just kind of switched what their roles were.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think the biggest takeaway from that in any business is you got to be flexible, right? The market really dictates what you're going to do next, where you're going to go. Sometimes you can go into something with the best intentions, and this is what the plan is, and we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And then, like the flip of a switch, something changes, and you've got to be able to maneuver around that and do something different or still stay relevant. So I think that's great to have that flexibility and say, okay, we're doing flips now and everybody's changing. Put on your different hats. We're about to get into something different here.
Right. No, I think I sold over 200 houses that were foreclosures in a couple of years. And this year I've sold one.
Wow.
So, yeah.
And what do you think is the reasoning there? Just because of programs like HARP and just government programs trying to keep people from going into foreclosure?
It's prices. Our median price in 2011 was 110 in Greeley, where I'm at. And right now it's 290.
Wow.
And so anybody who was in trouble could sell their house. They had equity in it pretty much. And a few properties still go to the foreclosure sale, but then most of them are bought by investors because, the loan balance isn't that high. It's just, we went from seeing 30 to 50 properties going to the foreclosure sale a week to now it's one or two. And then most of those are bought by investors. So it's more of the market has just been so good that people can sell. They don't have to go into foreclosure now, where before, they don't have any equity. They're underwater. They don't have any other choice.
Right.
Mark, I got a question that I'm actually kind of ripping from James Altucher's podcast. I was listening to a podcast he had on Tim Ferriss, who I know Steve likes as well. And they were saying one of the questions he asked a guest is, if you had like one book that you gift to somebody else, I don't know if you do have a book that you've ever given out or recommended to somebody as far as it pertains to real estate. Is there any book that you've read that you've tended to recommend to people as far as real estate goes?
Yeah, I've written a few myself, but besides mine, Gary Keller, Real Estate Investor or Millionaire Real Estate Investor is really good. That was one I read before I bought my rentals and kind of, a lot of people say Rich Dad, Poor Dad, but I think that's more, motivational, where Gary Keller's is really instructional and gives details and information on it. That was a really good one. And just as far as, there's so many attitude and other books I love to read, like The War of Art is one I really love, from Stephen Pressfield, just about pushing through difficulties and having the right attitude about things. But those are two really good ones that come to mind.
I was going to say, I thought you said The Art of War because that's over Steve's head right now. But yeah, War of Art is a great one. Just kind of feeling that. Is that the one that's kind of feeling about, he wrote about resistance too, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I actually have a quote in my home office that says, "Conquer the resistance," from that book, just because, when you're at the very end of finishing a task, you're 95% done, that's when things seem to get the most difficult. You don't want to work. You're just sluggish, and just realizing that and pushing through makes a huge difference in almost everything you're doing.
Yeah, I think sometimes it almost feels euphoric to start something new, but for whatever reason, like the very end completing something feels great, but that 5-10% before that, it just a lot of projects go there to die. And I think with real estate investing, you see that a lot in different forums and different groups where people are talking about, how do you get started? I want to get started. How do you do it? And they might be asking that question for years. And sometimes it's just got to get started and do the damn thing.
Yep, just do it. No, I've interviewed a lot of people in my podcast, and a lot of them lost money on deals, and they're not upset, they're not mad about it. It's like, hey, I was educated. It's a lot cheaper education than college. So,
yeah, we've, in business, we've certainly taken our lumps and continue to. We try a new idea or a new project, and it falls flat, but you never walk away with nothing. You come away with what you learned out of that, and you grow. So, real estate investing is the same way. You have to be in it for the long game and, take your bumps and bruises along the way.
Yep, exactly.
So, Mark, if somebody's interested in checking out your books, would they be able to get that at investformore.com or?
They're all on Amazon. So I have a link to Invest for More to a lot of my books, but, Build a Rental Property Empire is one of my more popular ones. It's been a bestseller for a while. And then I've got, Fix and Flip Your Way to Financial Freedom that goes over flipping. How to make it big as a real estate agent, talks about the agency side. And then I've got an attitude book as well. And then I wrote a book with Jay Scott, who's a really popular flipper. And we wrote a book on negotiating real estate. So those are all on Amazon as paperbacks, ebooks, and then the flip book, the rental property book, and the negotiating book are all audiobooks too.
Oh, so very cool. So yeah, I'm assuming if somebody just goes to Amazon and searches your name, that'd probably be an easy way to get there if they're under the books filter.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, and I think all the covers, because I think I saw them, all the covers are very similar too, so you should be able to recognize them pretty easily.
You know what I love about it is Mark, you look like you're around my age. I'm not going to ask, but I remember as a kid, first wanting to get into real estate or looking into it, there wasn't a whole lot of books out there. You had to go to these seminars. You had to go to like these, they'd come to the convention center, I think like maybe Carlton Sheets or whoever it was at the time, right? And they'd take all your money and they'd go out and do a couple flips or whatever. I just think it's awesome that you can go on Amazon now and, you get a book, you get all this person's insight, all their experience and what they're doing. And that stuff is just so much more easily available than it was 15 years ago, where, you had to invest an afternoon and sit with these guys who were, selling snake oil and trying to, get you to sign over your first kid.
Right. Yeah. No. And the blogs and websites out there, there's so much information. I think I have like 400 articles I've written on my site, Invest for More. And there's other sites out there like, Bigger Pockets, which is my big competitor. So I don't want to say their name too loud, but no. And there's just a lot of information out there, and and there's still those programs around. They'll try and charge you $50,000 to learn how to do things, but you don't need those. I'd always say buy a house. You'll learn a lot more than taking those. So it's really nice. And yeah, when I first started out, I kind of just learned from my dad what he was doing. There was no books or anything, and then I ended up starting my blog on a whim. And then I found out, all this other information. I'm like, wow, I'm learning so much. I started a blog to teach other people, and I end up learning so much more myself from what's out there. It's really amazing the time we live in right now.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, Mark, I want to say thank you for being a guest here. Definitely interesting learning about your market in the Colorado area, and also just how you've kind of made your money and built up a team. I think it's a great inspiration for people that are listening. If they want to connect with Mark, they can go to investformore.com, and that's for the number FOUR. And I just want to thank you again for being a guest on our podcast here today. And hope you round out 2017 in style here.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for having me on. It's a great time. And hopefully end of the year finishes strong, and hope you guys have a great year as well.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Mark.